Welcome to the CTO2CTO podcast, where Chief Technology Officers dig into the challenges and opportunities that leaders face every day at the intersection of business and innovation. I'm your host, Lucas Hendrich, CTO at Forte Group.
So welcome to the podcast. Today we're going to talk with Jeff Miller, the heads up technology at LinenMaster, previous CTO at Yellow and NCSA. Mm-hmm. And we're happy to have you here.
All right, I'm happy to be here.
So let's, everyone likes an origin story.
Sure.
And your roots are in Idaho.
Iowa.
I'm sorry, Iowa.
No worries.
And if I get this right, you worked in a family business and a hardware store.
Yep. Right around 6 months of age, my parents decided to go it on their own on the entrepreneurial path and started a hardware store, small town Iowa. It's where they both kind of grew up. It was kind of the central location of both their families, and so it was a great experience growing up. You know, there was the hard work aspect, there was the entrepreneurial aspect. You know, got to keep raising revenues, keep offering different services, try services out, retire services that aren't working, and so I learned a lot from that. And so yeah, then I decided to move to the big city. So
what would be an example of something you learned from that you apply now and as a leader in technology?
Oh man, without trying to be too trite, it is the roll your sleeves up kind of approach, right?
Yeah.
It's if there was a job to be done and there was no one around to do it, I would find my mom or dad doing that, And so I try to enact that today, whether it's a project that needs to be done or a process that needs to be optimized and there's just like no one else around to do it, just roll my sleeves up and get dirty.
Yeah. Constant founder mode, or was it more pleasant than that?
It was definitely more pleasant than that. They had a stable business and it wasn't a growth business like a tech firm, right?
Mm-hmm.
But stable business, provided good living for the family, staple in the community, all that type of stuff. So yeah, it wasn't always scrounging and that type of thing. But yeah, they work 6-7 days a week at times, and so
it also strikes me that the kind of business is not that different from a laundry business, for example, which is now your customer, and that these are very these are necessities that I don't foresee a world that they'll be easily replaced by AI or even by 3D printing, manufacturing.
Yeah. When I think about our software and the customers that are using it, and let's say we have when I started, we would kind of do releases pretty, not arbitrarily, but on our specific release days. Mm-hmm. And when I got there, we said, like, why are we even doing releases? Because it's a legacy code base, highly not very tested from a unit testing perspective. And so why are we even doing releases around the first, right? These are sometimes small businesses, sometimes medium-sized businesses, but either way, we do not want to interrupt invoicing. We do not want to interrupt payments to these to help these businesses grow and thrive. That's what our software is there for. Mm-hmm. And so we put small freeze windows around the first of the month, but it's just like that perspective that I could just imagine my parents went like around the first of the month when their invoicing would go out and there'd be some banking problem or some tech problem that they couldn't spit out the invoices, and so I hope that entrepreneurial background helps me translate that into what I'm doing today.
Yeah, well, it's also it's good sectors to be in.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
As long as there is a need for, let's say, clothing.
Yeah, clothing or hospitals, right? It would be a very bad problem if somebody goes into a surgery and there's no sheets to be put on the bed, right?
Or dirty sheets.
Yeah, or dirty sheets to be put on the bed, even worse. So yeah, it's a critical business, and it's not likely to be totally transformed by AI.
Yeah. Same with hardware.
Yeah,
as long as humans
hardware.
Want to tinker.
Yep, exactly. And the beauty of those small hardware stores is, you can maybe get a better price somewhere. They do their best to try to stay competitive, but it's really that guidance, right? Mm-hmm. That mentorship when you're in the store, just like a junior engineer, just like, somebody coming into a business for the first time. You bought your first house. I have this leak under my sink. I don't exactly know what to do. It's really nice to have a consultation with somebody there.
Yeah, and it makes me think too, we're all using LLMs for everything, right? Explain me this, explain me that, bring me up to speed.
Yep.
But I still go to YouTube if I need to see something happen, and I guess that'll ultimately be AI generated as well. But It's interesting how that's a great example. In a hardware store, someone can walk you through it and kind of tell you the inside of things. And I can definitely see, walking junior engineers through a similar problems to solve, especially when there's ambiguity about what tool to use, what approach to take.
Or interns, right? We just had our first intern cohort at LinenMaster, and you learn a lot of stuff in college, but when you go to apply it in the real world, it's just slightly different. And having somebody walk you through that, it's really easy.
Absolutely.
It's a really much more enriching experience for both parties.
So, and this is going to jump to something because you made me think of it. So when I interview engineers, obviously people are incorporating LLMs into everything, into their responses, and it can be a complicating factor. I'm trying to find leverage in it, though.
Yeah.
So I will even, say exactly what I'm going to ask you in person ahead of time. Go ahead and use your best LLM.
Yep.
And then walk you through it. And the way I think about it is, it's like if you're getting interrogated for a crime and someone says, "What did you do last night?"
Yeah.
Well, I went to the store. What did you buy?
Yeah.
Why did you go to the store?
Yep.
You can easily have an alibi, but you can tell very quickly if someone doesn't know how to walk you through the approach and the thinking process that they went through to take that.
Yeah.
Do you find that, how are you using AI in terms of, screening candidates now, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think interviewing is one of the things that we're going to have to figure out as an industry, right? But I think you're going down the right path. That's a number of years ago, I pivoted to doing take-home type of challenges versus someone's hovering over your shoulder and trying to watch every line of code you write. And people, I would often get questions like, what if somebody's having somebody else do the work? And it would come back to exactly what you're saying, because we wouldn't just take the work, review it, and then send it back, right? The next step of the interview was a line by line ish walkthrough with a senior engineer to interrogate some of those decisions. Like, why'd you go this path? Why'd you choose this language? Why'd you choose this framework? All of those type of questions. So this year with the interns, I didn't really even feel like making them do extra work. I just said, bring the code example you're most proud of. And then we just walked through it. And what made you proud about it? That showed me their passion. How would you test this if they didn't have tests? Why did you structure it this way? All those type of questions that you're talking about. But you don't get that context always from the LLM.
Yeah. Can you imagine a world in which the answers to that question will be, well, I structured the prompt this way for this result?
That is a very fair point. It's definitely coming. So I think this is going to be an evolving conversation for sure.
Yeah. Obviously, we're going to talk more about AI. But I was curious about something that let's say is more challenging than incorporating AI, and that is how you deal with legacy code bases.
Yes.
As I understand, LinenMaster has been around since 1995. 95?
Yeah, 30 years. So
is there still code from that era?
There's definitely still code from that era. Yeah. So
don't worry, we're all friends here.
So a number of years ago, I was at a commercial lender, a B2C lender, and I was working on the shiny new project when I was hired in. And this shiny new project was...
I'm sorry.
No worries. This shiny new project was meant to be a from the ground up rebuild. Then we'll hit the end date, we'll migrate all the customers, and it's going to be bliss, right? Well, of course, that didn't go well. And so about a year into my role on that team, there was a need on the most legacy part of the code. And when I was being pitched to go run that team, it was like, yeah, this is making us $750 million. We should invest in this. It was at that time totally outsourced to a firm offshore. And so I just embraced it, right? Like my whole point of writing any technology is the end result, the business result. I do try to keep up on the cutting edge of technology, but I'm not the type of person that's like, Rust just came out. I got to go build an app in Rust just to see what it's like, right? I'll learn the characteristics of it, learn where we can leverage it potentially. And I feel like Rust is always picked out as that new shiny technology.
That's what it is right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is right now.
We'll see in 6 months.
Exactly. Yeah. But anyway, my point is I just embraced it. So at LinenMaster, it's really the same thing, right? This software is running the vast majority of our business. So, we can't just say we're going to do this big rewrite it's going to take 12 to 24 months. We're on a PE timescale. So like that takes up most of the, like a lot of the time that we're going to need. And so, so we're just embracing it. We're taking the fig strangler approach, taking out little pieces at a time, trying to, isolate the most impactful or most beneficial or most problematic areas of the code and just address those little by little.
Yeah, no, I think small chunks, I think is, it makes me think of this will sound crazy, but do you remember that show That's Incredible? Were you old enough for that?
I do not remember that show. Sorry.
Okay. Well, it was like one of those shows with incredible things, and this guy actually ate a small airplane.
Oh, just piece by
stuck
piece?
with me as sort of the perfect analog for these monster code bases. You're talking about more than X million lines of code.
Yep.
How do you digest it? And it's very incremental if you're going to do it. One thing that I'm curious about is, have you started experimenting with or started using LLMs to make that process go faster, to understand the spaghetti, the intent?
Yeah, so we have gone under quite a evolution in the last 12 months. So we went from being pretty constrained and pretty conservative around AI to being kind of being as forward looking as we can. So we essentially have two AI paths. So we have most of the team on the tried and tested, AIs that we can trust. And then we have me and a couple other senior engineers on a more exploratory path. And so we're trying to identify tools to make processes more efficient. We're trying to find areas that we could integrate into the platform itself. Our software, like a lender, like all these other software that require very specific. We can't say your invoice is roughly $20 last month, right? It's got to be precise. And so I think that's one of the challenges I had in my roles previously, is just getting the organization to realize a lot of people view code as deterministic, right? If this, then that, right? But that's just not how it is with AI, right? You put in an input and you get a result, and it's probabilistically correct, right? But that doesn't mean it's absolutely correct. And so we need to balance that as well. And so we're looking for opportunities to, summarize conversations. So generally there's a business owner or a plant manager, and they have people in the field or in the factory. It's a factory-like environment. So, but they'll talk about, I visited Bob's Burgers today. Bob was not very happy with our services. Here's what his complaints were. And then they just document those things. And at the end of the day, have a meeting with the plant manager to kind of go through that. We're looking to automate those systems, right? Summarize those conversations. That's where we can interject AI. And obviously the code generation process itself. So believe it or not, it's not that good at interpreting our 30-year-old C++ code, but it is better at some of the more modern stuff that's been created over time, specs and JavaScript, that type of thing. So we're trying to enter where it's easiest and then expand to the more difficult areas.
Yeah, it's interesting. That seems to be a common theme, that some languages it's really good, some languages it's not, and I guess just those foundation models had to use what they could.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate because a lot of these legacy code bases, we're facing a similar project right now. 30-year-old, 3.3 million lines of code, C++.
Yep, exactly. And, we run into errors on a week-to-week basis that I talk to my CS team, my customer service team, and my CEO and executives team. We shouldn't have to deal with this problem, but unfortunately we do because of our, tech debt, legacy code base, whatever you want to phrase it as. And so, so when we encounter one of those scenarios, we try to migrate it as much as possible. We can't always do that, of course. So then we fix it in line, but we're essentially, writing code for managing database connections, for instance. And it's just like, this is a solved problem. Makes you bang your head.
Well, yeah, and it's also, it kind of, how do you approach the buy versus build equation with that, especially when you're building something that's somewhat generic but tailored for specific industry? Do you have a model for that?
Yeah, I think I tend to always try to look for buy or open source first, but we have to make it feel like a unified experience. So if we're buying something that someone's going to eventually steal our customer because it's a kind of a freemium-ish model, that's not going to work. And if we can't white label it or we can't make it feel unified, that's not going to work. So so we have we look at commodities, right? So right now, our industry is very specific. Like people like things the way they like them. I'm sure this is the same in a lot of different places, but so we tend to look for commodities like a CRM, but then highly modify it for our industry and highly modify it for our onboarding team to help clients figure out what their specific needs are and make the software work for them.
So one thing interesting about at least observation, I had the fortune of working for a startup for many years that was PE backed at one point. Went through a couple different transactions, then worked directly with PE, advising, and then in an interim CTO role. I love this tension between, it's very attractive when you have niche software that has a lot of legacy code because it's like it was written once and ostensibly could run forever.
Yep.
That's a very attractive thing, and yet there is entropy that happens over time, and at some point, it's just the bloat around you evolves to the point where, or things become deprecated. You have no choice. So, what's your filter for? Okay, this is existential risk if we don't attack this tech debt. This is tech debt we can live with. We just bolster it up somehow. It no longer scales, vertically, so we can try scaling horizontally. Like, how do you approach those decisions?
So we try to use data wherever possible, right? So for us, that mostly means adding logging, adding monitoring for particular areas. Because the one thing I would add to your balance there is use cases change too, right? And so we have like an API endpoint that now it's got way more volume because the use case has changed from the customer standpoint. And so we had to take a look at that, had to refactor it quite a bit. But I think the existential stuff that we look at, we are one of the first major players in this industry to go to the cloud. Seems like a big thing for our industry, but we all know that's like a 10-year-old decision. But now that adds different constraints, right? We can't just say upgrade your on-prem server or don't upgrade your on-prem server because we haven't upgraded yet, right? We are now dictated by the AWSs of the world or other cloud providers where they're like, we're no longer supporting this. You have to move. And so,
not to mention the cost.
Yeah. So we tend to try to make those decisions. We just made one of those decisions where the public version of an API is no longer going to be supported, but you can pay for advanced support. And when we looked at the cost benefit analysis, it was like, it's not worth our time to just go redirect our roadmap to rewrite this right now. We'll get to the rewrite in the next 12 months. So we're just going to pay for support for 1 year and then we'll migrate off. But I think it's always that it goes back to that operating as an owner mentality of like, I can have these 5 people distracted for 2 months, or I could pay $4,000.
Right. Right. I get a sense sometimes that people don't realize how much desktop software
still exists.
Yep. When you talk about on-prem, or is in some kind of hybrid cloud model.
Yeah.
But there's still some shipped component that actually means you're, shipping to someone to install somehow.
Yeah. So for on-prem, for us, this does not mean a nice rack server in a data center. This generally means a commercially purchased server in a server closet in a commercial laundry.
Yes.
And these commercial laundries are not like a coin-op laundry or not like a laundromat or anything like that, or dry cleaner. These are, they're essentially factory environments. Huge multi-million-dollar tunnel type of washers that you'd have at home. A hospital will drop off thousands of pounds of laundry to be laundered and returned on a predictable basis. I was joking with you maybe before the event or earlier in this conversation about the hospitals. They can't have like lack of scrubs.
Right.
So that's what our software is there to do, is help guide that. But one of the highest operational risks of running these businesses is them burning down. Lint buildup and then fire, and then boom, your factory's up in flames.
Image of the dust bunnies.
Yes, exactly. You have
I'm always yelling at my kids to clean the filter on my dryer.
Exactly. They have to do that on a commercial scale. And so I've heard an owner joke that we do our best to clean this up, but if that ever happens, I'm running to that server room first. And so with our software, luckily, the previous owner had the good foresight to go with a thin client and then a thick back end. So he moved to the cloud. It's It's a C++ code wrapped in a .NET wrapper in the cloud. So it is a unique architecture.
Observability a bit challenging too, right?
Exactly. So, but the point is their data, all of the actual logic is in the cloud, and then they have a thin client on-prem. So, so we are moving a lot of that experience to the web right now, or to mobile apps, and so so they'll have even more separation from that.
Now, one thing that it is, again, just observational, highly general statement, but you start a company, around a specific problem you're solving that people may or may not realize that they have. Then you create a need and you get adoption and you create transactions, volume, revenue, and that's your first thing. And when people talk about data as an asset, again, generally, typically, that's like, well, once we get to this milestone, then we'll start the roadmap for that. We'll figure it out. You're dealing with tons of, I'm assuming, sensor data, very valuable. And then now with the ability to train models, that data has a whole different value proposition. So how whatever you can share and how you're approaching that.
Yeah, it potentially does. Right now, it is very operational, right? You bring in the laundry, you weigh it, or you count. I say count generally because there's scanning with barcodes, they're scanning with RFID, but by and large of our customers are through weight. So we are integrated with floor scales and all that type of stuff, hand scanners for barcodes. And so right now we're using it very operationally. And so we have, I don't want to say bigger fish to fry, but we have to make some improvements in the software before we can really get to those second level problems. But I definitely think there's an opportunity to take a look at the volumes that are coming in. We're trying to look at right now helping the laundries reprioritize orders. Right now it's essentially a FIFO queue, right? First in, first out. And so if we can have a high priority order get reprioritized without a human having to make that decision, that's probably the next step for us, and helping them do load management and potentially staffing management, because staffing in these environments is a very challenging situation. And so if they don't need people during these hours, let's give their workers a break and have them come in when we really need them. So I think those are our next steps in terms of making things more optimized for the owners.
And what about the data architecture behind this legacy application, and how are you modernizing that, and what's your thinking around that?
Yeah, again, incremental. So we have a relatively modern operational database. We have a modern data warehouse, and so
do you mind if I ask what the stack is? Or?
Yeah. So we have from a data perspective. Yeah. So we have MySQL on the operational side, and then we have Snowflake on the data warehouse side. And so the Snowflake side really pulls all these plants together. Each plant kind of operates a little bit different, even if they have the same owner in a region. It's just very coupled to the staff, to the physical environment. If the orders come in on the left or on the right and then go out on the left, like there's just a lot that's very specific to those individual plants. And so, but at the end of the day, if you own multiple plants, you want to report across them, right? And so that's where Snowflake and our analytics tools help us. From the operational side, though, it was written by a non-software trained engineer. And so he was doing exactly what you're saying, solving a problem, doing his best to get it done on a timely basis, solving customer needs. And so we do have challenges over there. But instead of kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and worrying about data migrations and syncing and all that type of stuff, we're choosing instead to just work with what we have. So one very trivial example is we have an engineer right now moving image code from being saved in a table to S3 and then saving the link, right? Just basic stuff, but just cleaning it up over time.
And S3 is relatively inexpensive, so
it is. But
you're decoupling your storage. It's good.
Exactly. So adding indexes, adding relationships, like all these different things that we're just doing a little bit at a time.
So then for the I guess the analytics user, the owner of several factories. Are you designing a semantic layer in Snowflake that's compatible with the majority of your user base, or do you find that to be a big challenge?
It is a bit of a challenge. So some of our users are quite technical, and then some of our users want the data and they really respect the need for the data. don't have the person on staff or they don't have the particular skills. And so we are trying to find that balance. Our current provider, I don't know if I want to mention them, they're not, they're just a little too techy for most of these laundries. So we've brought in a new vendor that it just feels like a spreadsheet. But behind the scenes, it constructs all the Snowflake queries in the most optimized way to save us on costs and save the performance.
Isn't it funny? The spreadsheet, it'll never go away.
I know. It's the most ubiquitous programming language we have. Yep.
I feel like that's where ChatGPT is going.
Yeah.
It becomes ubiquitous.
Yep. I heard on a different one of your episodes, just somebody talking about Copilot in Excel and how that's just starting to pull out insights and it's
not helping.
It's not helping. I haven't used it yet, but yeah, I think we'll get there.
Yeah. Prior to beginning the podcast, we were talking a little bit about your time at NCSA.
Yeah.
And we're talking about sort of talent, hiring, leading talent. I think the world of sports is probably well, you could say sports, you could say SEAL teams, but that kind of putting together of teams. We mentioned Moneyball, how you pair different attributes. I'm just curious what you think about that, and what insight you may have gotten from building that platform to making decisions and finding talent and putting teams together.
Yeah, so NCSA is a Chicago-based company. It stands for Next College Student Athlete, and it is a product that matches high school student athletes with college coaches. And parties on both sides of that transaction have different needs, right? And so I think when I think about the learnings that go forward, it's really trying to segment customer bases and try to drive those needs or try to drive those requirements in a way that satisfies both, but that you're not getting super niche in either one of those, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so we had that same sort of experience at Yellow, a different type of recruiting, mostly helping Fortune 100 companies in the federal government to hire entry-level talent. But some of those companies needed very highly vetted individuals to join their organization. And some of them needed more of a volume approach, and they were going to suss out the actual talent they were looking for over time through assessments or through individual interviews or that type of thing. And so the platform in that case was very configurable. You could do a bunch of different things. It was so hard to write all of the unit tests, but that was a big focus when I was there, just to get as many of these things covered in an automated way so that all of our releases were much more predictable. So I think it was really that. So it was the shift from code paths to user segments or cohorts.
Interesting. And I also think about the matching element of this, right? Because the reason why a coach might choose someone and the reason why someone might choose a coach, it's very similar to we did work mostly on the QA side with Tinder, so there's another paradigm for that. But I think about it in terms of how do you think we could make hiring more efficient in engineering, and how are you starting to incorporate AI into that?
Yeah, at Yellow, that was definitely relevant, right? It was at the launch of ChatGPT when I was there. My CEO at the time at Yellow, he was very tech forward, very AI forward, and so he wanted to try to figure out any ways we could do this. One of the challenges at that organization and also the organizations that we supported was moving from a deterministic mental model to a probabilistic mental model. And so when our clients or when our internal product managers or even the customer service team would think about engineering, they think about it in a, if this happens, then do that, and all that type of stuff. It's very, very deterministic. AI is not that way, right? It's you put in some inputs. Gen AI. You're right.
What most people think of as AI these days.
Correct. Yeah. So when you put in inputs, you get an output, and it's probabilistically correct, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's enough for the users. And so we tiptoed around it. We did some deterministic matching, like you were mentioning, breaking down a resume into skill sets, and that was a buy versus build decision as well. We ended up going with a partner just because they had a number of years of experience training models. They eventually switched to an AI model versus a deterministic model, and so we got that shine of AI through that vendor. Again, we were just trying to help. In that case, we were also helping candidates prepare. So we would kind of build interview prep materials because one of the biggest complaints from our clients was that just interviewees came in totally unprepared, whether unprepared about that company, unprepared about the industry, didn't even know how to answer certain questions, and so we tried to help bring in candidates as well.
Mm-hmm. How would you design? It sounds like a crazy question, but when you think about the ideal engineer on your team, how would you weight attributes such that a model would detect those attributes? So think about
interesting.
What do you index on?
Well, I'll go to a slightly side story. I had a CEO that I was working for a number of years ago that came from the sales background. And so she wanted very solid metrics about engineering, right? And my opinion about engineering metrics is that no matter which one we choose, we're going to optimize for a characteristic. I'm not sure that's going to be the right characteristic. And so whether it's lines of code or all these other things. So we brought in a tool that kind of looked at all the Git activity, and it looked at Jira activity and tried to find and stack rank your engineers. And so we did a trial run with that company. And one of the most well-known best engineers on the team was in the bottom quartile. And so we looked at the results and I was like, we could use this tool, but look at this here at the bottom.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, how is she down there? And it's because of that glue player. She was just so good at floating between different groups and hearing a challenge on team X and translating that to team Y. And you need to do this thing. Talk to this person because he or she knows that part of the code base really well. And so it's really that. It's you do have to have a certain amount of technical acumen and curiosity, but really it's the connector and pulling people together to obtain a shared result.
Yeah.
And so when you bring it back to optimizing AI, I would struggle to answer that. I think it's just these intangibles.
You're right. No, that's a great. I was going to say there's tangible and intangible.
Yeah.
And there's also, the components of a team that you really can't focus on individual attributes, and I think I mentioned this before. This is part of why I think hiring and labor market in general is so inefficient, is that we kind of look for the recommended daily allowance.
Yeah.
You got to be good at this. You got to be good at this. You got to be good at this. You don't have to knock it out of the park.
Yep.
But you have to be competent across so many things that most people aren't. Most people may excel in one area, and the trade-off is that in another area they don't.
Yeah. I think AI is smoothing that out for sure, right? It is helping the growth, the learning curve, and the growth pattern for a lot of different of those tangible skill sets. And so that leads me to think you even need to optimize more for those intangibles. So I've sometimes gotten the question at LinenMaster that we have a new web stack, right? Modern C#, modern React on the front end. And people are like, why'd you choose C#? You've never done anything in the Microsoft stack. And I was like, that's the team we had, right? And so I can learn that. I can translate concepts. I would do it this way in this language. How would I do that over here? And just drive those conversations, and then obviously use AI to help me learn as well. And so I think some of those tangibles are honestly being more commoditized.
Yeah, I think about it too in terms of I like to use an analogy here of where you want to burn mental calories.
Great.
So if you can reserve mental calories for really hard stuff, then and then everything else give it to AI to spin on. Yeah. Then I think you're going to be solving more interesting problems in that ambiguous space, which is where most people are uncomfortable. Yeah. And I think that's where intangibles really matter. To navigate that ambiguous space, you have to be very attuned emotionally. You also have to distance yourself. You have to have, there's a book called The Scout Mindset that I like, where, you're always broadening your picture. Yeah. And you have to realize that, you have to do satisficing, meaning you have to make complex trade-offs. Yeah. Those are all skills that I think are going to, come more to the surface. I think that there's a couple views. One view is that, and I don't agree with this view, but it's, Malthusian. Well, eventually AI will get good enough that it can do the hard cognitive stuff too. Yeah. I tend to think that hard cognitive, there's just so many problems to solve.
There are, and the priorities are not necessarily straightforward, right?
Precisely.
And so I was actually thinking about, we had a Gen AI type of conversation yesterday in the office, and my thought kind of came back around to if you remember in the Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg, the decision fatigue they would I guess avoid by choosing the same clothes every day. I guess I'm seeing myself do that with Gen AI on theoretically a little bit more challenging conversations. So I had to buy a projector for a presentation coming up, and normally I'd spend maybe an hour like, okay, which projector should I get? This time I just like found the top 5 that I cared about, threw it in there, just took the recommendation, right? What's going to be the harm,
Yeah.
And so that decision is now no longer a decision for me. It is a little bit, right? I read the reasons why, but trying to eliminate, remove, whatever you want to say, all of those lower level decisions so that you can really think about the harder problems, I think is probably the right way to think about it.
I think there's also going to be an evolution of this where all of that easy stuff. So for example, I have an idea for a business, and I just did a business plan in less than, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Like all the components were there from 2 or 3 prompts. I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah. Nice.
So whoever reads that business plan, they're going to look at it, and maybe right now they're evaluating, well, was this generated or not? Do I care because the idea is good? Then maybe there'll be no plan in the future. It'll become so concise because an LLM will ingest it first and say, okay, just tell me what's the value proposition?
Yeah.
How much money am I going to make? And what's the probability?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It could get that far. I think.
Are we just going to cut through all the chaff eventually?
Yeah, it's very possible. I've been experimenting with similar prompts, but like on the executive level. So you see these, clickbaity titles of should the CEO be replaced with AI or those type of things. And so I put questions in there and try to see how it would be formulating the thought process. And not that I'm necessarily taking the results, but like at least the thought process of like, how would you come to the answer? How are we thinking about the answer? And are there gaps that we should address?
Yeah. No, exactly. It's great at finding the blind spots. And that's I think everything that where I have a point of view, I'm vetting that point of view now.
Yeah.
Because you're essentially vetting against the probability that it's like the chess database. If you ever play chess online, you could take a 98% move or a 2% move.
Yeah.
You better have a damn good reason for that 2% move.
Yeah. And I mean, it challenges different paradigms too that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So like when I was hands-on coding on a day-to-day basis, I was always a big fan of tiny commits, very small pull requests, just as much volume as you could do in small chunks. Same thing as what we're doing now on an architectural level, on a systems design level. But I would do these very small commits, but now I will put my thought process through an AI model, Cursor or OpenAI or whatever, and it will come up with these more comprehensive answers that are thinking about use cases that I hadn't quite thought of yet. I probably would have after 3 or 4 commits, but now my commits are getting larger, or our chunks are getting bigger, and I got to be okay with that. I got to figure out ways to be okay with that.
Yeah. I guess if you're using output from prompts, then the chances are it's more readable. It's commented as doing the things that lazy people don't like to do.
Yeah.
So it's going to follow a pattern.
Yep.
I think those are all plus side. I have a couple videos I put out with vibe coding that I love doing it. I think as just a faster way to get to a prototype, creates a canvas. You can throw things at the wall.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of junk we're going to create.
Yep.
There's probably a lot of throwaway stuff we're going to create. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think there's no, I guess we're burning energy somewhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. It's which type of energy, right?
Which type of energy we're burning.
Yeah. I kind of poo-pooed metrics a bit earlier, but I definitely think they're important, and they're just like different for every context. And so normally if I were like, we came up with a set of metrics that we're going to now follow going forward. And normally I'd have to write some sort of custom software to go pull these out of these different systems and marry it all together. I created that app almost purely with vibe coding. I think I wrote 10 lines of code. It's not production, but it is gathering important metrics for us, right?
Right.
And so that might be something that took me a month or two earlier, but this is like literally a day.
Which the end result is better decision making.
Yeah.
So again, solving those big problems.
Yep.
Not spending a bunch of time just building the scaffolding so you can then come to a conclusion, I think is
exactly. And business moves fast.
Yeah.
These might not be the metrics we want forever.
Right.
And so the investment, keeping the investment low is important.
Imagine waiting for a monthly report to
yeah. Or quarter. Yeah. All of those timeframes are just out the window these days.
Yeah. Which is good. I think so many decisions, are based on what the movement of the planets. Like why do we do these things on this basis?
Yep.
Can't we do these things in smaller increments?
Yeah. Exactly. For sure.
Of course, publicly traded companies wouldn't want to have a daily shareholder report, but
well,
but maybe
yeah. I don't know if they would, but that is
unless you consider their performance on a daily basis a kind of report. It's definitely information.
It becomes a signal of noise problem,
Yes, exactly.
And so it is it can be difficult to see. Is this just a momentary blip, or is there a trend we need to follow here?
Yeah. Well, I think that with all the uncertainty, at least the response that I've taken personally, and also what I'm trying to implement in our organization is within certain guidelines, we should be engaging this stuff all the time.
Yep.
There's no harm in it.
Yep.
And I was just speaking to someone, a podcast to be released, who mentioned he said the word stigma. That there's a stigma that says if I'm doing this, I'm somehow cheating. Yeah. Now, education, obviously, I'm going through with teenage kids, right? That no one knows how to sort this out quite yet. Yeah. It's happening too quickly. Yeah. I'm telling them, look, if you didn't get it when they put it on the chalkboard, absolutely ask ChatGPT to break it down for you.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll really find your learning style.
I was just gonna say it's the learning style thing. I in some contexts I'm really good with audio, and then in some contexts I can't keep the focus, right? Yeah. And hands-on really helps me. And so getting the concepts from one environment and then reapplying them in a different way in a different environment, it's so important. And so I do think that there is that stigma that people have of like cheating, and like when Rails came on the scene, for instance, it felt like cheating that you could go from nothing to a functional website in less than an hour. Yeah. And that did feel like cheating. But the reformation of that context is just like, now I can actually do what's important. I don't have to worry about, getting the routes to go to the controllers, to go to the models, like all of that is taken care of. And so I think it's just changing that mindset to what's important. And but it's also not black and white. When we have an AI policy, we expect all of our employees to follow the AI policy. But in different contexts, let's throw it out the window. Let's do some experimentation. Let's figure out what we're doing. We're doing a hackathon right now. That
was the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah.
So the hackathon is trying to memorialize this mentality shift from being conservative on the AI front to being aggressive on the AI front. And so it's all in on AI. So all the teams are either incorporating AI in some way to their feature, or they are very much leaning on it in the process of building their tools. So we temporarily suspended the AI policy. This is not going to production, but just let's see what we can do. And then we're going to present those findings to the executive team and then the company, and committing to getting one of those productionalized. And then we'll work on getting it back into alignment with the policy.
So there is some product focus here, so that there are some boundaries, because I've seen hackathons happen in different ways. One is kind of, blue sky, new product, and the other is, well, there's a percentage of our roadmap that we may fill with this stuff, if, and that goes into the prioritization. So it's the latter, I assume?
Yeah, so we have a business stakeholder on each team. And they all come from different perspectives too, which was not intended, but it kind of worked out in a really cool way. We have one that's very revenue focused, one that's kind of support focused, and one that's kind of more purely product focused. Then we also have a technical team lead on each team. So they either have a high technical competency to kind of really sort the wheat from the chaff of like, this idea is possible or not. And then, or they have a lot of context in the company, or both. Right. And so then we're trying to keep the frame as wide as possible for what they could do. But then we are saying we're committing to getting one of these on the roadmap, even though our roadmap's pretty packed. So,
yeah. Last question I have for you. This is just random. What's the last book you read, podcast you listened to, or show that you saw, or anything that you've consumed from media that's changed the way you fundamentally think about something?
So taking that question, so I think that it's not a new book, but the one that I think whenever I'm thinking about guidance, whether it's mentoring another tech leader or whether it's even mentoring people on my team, trying to give advice to a friend, is Extreme Ownership. That book, it's by Jocko Willink. It every one of those examples comes back to, how is this my fault? And fault is a loaded term, right? Because there's so many negative contexts around it. But how can I influence this situation into the outcome I'm looking for? And there's so much inadvertent blame that goes on. Like, oh, I can't do this because of this person or because of this roadblock. Well, what can you do to make that happen, right? And I just, that self-reflection and modification of my behaviors is just so empowering to me, whether it's, I use it in my daily life. So I would say that. And then to try to avoid the news and the noise out there in the world, I have found, I think it's called B Squared, the Brad Gerstner and Bill Gurley podcast, to be a nice balance of what's going on in the tech world and in the business world versus avoiding some of the partisan stuff that's out there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I've actually cut down significantly on my news diet. And part of it is that I've just found it, and this isn't an indictment of any media, it's just really hard to find any kind of objectivity.
Yeah.
And it's probably more of an incentive question than anything else.
That's right.
I guess I get a lot through podcasts just because it's kind of, a more natural, observational, among friends way of discussing things that I think can be, at best, it's entertaining as well. Well, how about a work of fiction, though?
Oh, interesting.
Again, could be any media, but
the one that came to me was The Nightingale. It was just like a really impactful story of these two sisters that go down different paths. And it kind of reminds me of my relationship with my brothers and how we've gone different paths, but have some of these same core values. And so.
No, great. Yeah. That's wonderful stuff. I'll just share the author that I discovered. Yeah. And I feel like I'm late to the party. I'm not a big science fiction consumer, although I do find, of all the fiction, especially in the overlap with technology, I really like science fiction that is plausible from sort of first principles laws of physics point of view. So not the Star Wars world where you can go into space and not float around. But I found this writer who goes by the moniker of Quantum, QNTM.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I'm reading a book of stories, and there's a novel coming out soon that I'm going to be reading as well.
Nice. The three body problem is the one that stands out to me on that. And I'm late. I was definitely late to that party. Yeah. But just thinking about problem solving with different rules was kind of what I took away from that book, and how they have to navigate these three bodies. So just that I have different rules to play by now. And how do I think about the problems?
No, it's interesting too, because that book changes the first principles.
Yeah, exactly.
And it kind of, you have to reframe all of those concepts. I'll leave one more, and that's, I don't know if you've heard of Ted Chiang. That there's a story, and I think the collection is called Exhalation. And I think the story is called The Life Cycle of Software Objects.
Okay.
And it's about AI, but it's about AI embodied in kind of, brought to the natural world through these animals. Like, imagine furry stuffed animals that have maybe a toddler level of intelligence. And it is wonderful, insightful, and heartbreaking. And the main character is a zookeeper, because who's best to work with these AIs but someone who's used to training,
That's really interesting. That book is definitely on my Goodreads list. I believe it ended up there from a Tim Ferriss recommendation at some point in the past, but I'll definitely put it up in the queue.
That story in particular.
Yeah.
And for the title, you're expecting something else, and it's just it's wonderful and heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Jeff,
cool.
Been a real pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah.
This was it for this episode. Join us next time for more real-world conversations between technology leaders. And if you like what you heard, subscribe to CTO2CTO. See you soon.